Okay, in section 3, we are going to end up looking at the scientific process of thinking, basically. Science is a way of thinking, questioning, and gathering evidence. Scientists make careful and systematic observations when they're doing their jobs. A lot of us in the real world do the same thing that scientists do. We make careful and systematic observations about things to figure things out. So that's really what the scientific method is how you are able to figure things out. One difference is scientists a lot of times are going to record observations as data. So the very first thing scientists are going to do is they're going to observe something, they're going to see something happening. So from that, scientists form a hypothesis, which is going to be a possible answer to a question that they have had. So the hypothesis is going to be what you think the outcome is going to be of what you're testing. Scientists then test their hypothesis and analyze their data. So they're going to set up an experiment, they're going to analyze the results, so they're going to look at what happened in that experiment, and then they're going to decide, do I need to do the thing again, or did it work the way that I thought it did? So when you do an experiment, science is considered self-correcting because you're going to end up having things that are going to occur where sometimes you may think it's going to turn out one way, but then once you do the experiment, you see, oh, my original idea was wrong, and here's what the right answer is now because you did this experiment, you have the results, and you're able to figure that thing out. Observational studies allow scientists to describe a phenomenon. So sometimes you can't really do an experiment. Sometimes you have to go out and actually observe and look at what's going on in the real world. Experimentals allow scientists to determine what is the cause of a phenomenon. So you could end up doing some experiment to be able to test that phenomenon. So experimental studies also allow science to, like I said, to determine what causes the phenomenon. To be able to figure that out, you're going to have what are known as independent variables. So independent variables are going to be the thing within the experiment that you're manipulating or changing from group to group. So it's going to be something that changes. There's a couple other things that it doesn't mention here that we'll see on a worksheet, and that is a control group and an experimental group. So the control group is going to be the group that is the normal group, what you're basing the experiment off of. The experimental group is going to be the group that has the independent variable applied to it. So that's how you're going to be able to know which group is which. So that is, again, the independent variable. Dependent variables are going to be things that are able to be observed and measured. So I a lot of times think of it as the end results of the experiment. What were you measuring at the end of that experiment? What were you observing at the end of that experiment? And they were affected by that independent variable. So independent variables affect dependent variables. So in a good controlled experiment, you only want to test one variable. You only want one independent variable so you know what you're testing is really what you're testing. So all the other things are going to be remaining constant. Those are going to be kept the same so you know you have a good experiment in the end. So once you've had a hypothesis and you've tested it and you've tested it many times, you could eventually develop a theory on something. A theory explains a wide range of observations and experimental results. A theory is supported by a wide range of scientific evidence. Theories can change based on new evidence. There was a point in time where scientists used to think that there was what was known as spontaneous generation, where if you left a piece of meat sitting out, it would turn into maggots. Well, later someone did an experiment to prove that meat didn't turn into maggots, that it was the flies laying eggs on the meat that produced the maggots, and so that theory ended up changing because of the results that were there. And that is the end of the notes for section 3.